So there's now been 2 major patches where some version of Herald Chaining has been removed, with Double Herald and Herald Polcirkeln being patched down 0.2, and Cast on Shock Voltaic Mark being removed in 0.3. And yet, the method I had invented and popularized, Herald Device plus Armor Explosion, has remained, and oh boy did GGG fuck up this patch, because the number of ways you can do this has nearly doubled. I know that most of you are here just for the setup, so let me just give you what you want, all the ways to Herald of Chain in 0.3. But before I do, there's one thing I must say, and that is, all of these setups, unless stated otherwise, will need your Armor Explosion to freeze. While this is 100% doable, for most players, I highly recommend starting with Polcirkeln and only worrying about freeze later. Alright, let's start with the OG method that started this all. If you're Warbringer, grab Anvil's Weight, and then put into your Herald Device Armor Explosion, Armor Demolisher 2, Cold Infusion, and Magnified Area 2. For most other classes, the cheapest option you have is to grab Gain Percentage Damage as Physical, either on your weapon or through the material solidification notable in your tree, and then putting in Armor Break 3, Armor Explosion, Armor Demolisher 2, Cold Infusion, and Magnified Area 2 into your Herald Device. If you're a Titan, you can alternatively grab Crushing Impacts and Shattering Blow. Still have Gain Percentage Damage as Physical on your mace, and put in Armor Explosion, Stun 2, Cold Infusion, and Magnified Area 2 into your Herald Device. If you're worried about Shattering Blow only breaking 50% of armor, this is a non-issue since you break 3x armor on normal monsters and 2x armor on magic monsters. And please be aware that cold damage cannot stun. This is why I recommend Gain Percentage Damage as Physical, but lightning and or fire damage are also sufficiently valid alternatives. If you really hate Giant's Blood or elemental elements, you can instead use Sculpted Suffering with Armor Explosion and Herald Device. If you want to use shield skills though, you will need something like Stomping Ground or Armor Explosion to trigger the initial Herald Device explosion. This method will need a good amount of added damage from tree and gear to actually make this work in endgame. If you have money, there exist 2 more options. The cheaper of the 2 is to use Ulnatal's Embrace, Armor Explosion, Armor Demolisher 2, Cold Infusion, and Magnified Area 2. You will need to get sources of chaos damage, with the only real ways to get this are either through an Ascendancy or through Gain Percentage of Damage as extra chaos damage, with the primary sources of that being Runes, Heart of the Well, and Time Lost Diamond. There's an even more expensive option, but it's also less gear dependent, which is to grab Rite of Passage with Spirit of the Wolf, grab Armor Explosion, Armor Demolisher 2, Cold Infusion, and Magnified Area 2. Some other noteworthy mentions are Herald of Blood with Armor Demolisher 2, Armor Explosion, and either Blood Mage's Blood Barb's Ascendancy or Gain Percentage Damage as Physical on your martial weapon. Herald of Plague is another option, and although it is not a Herald, Trample Toe with enough increases to physical damage can also infinitely chain. Now, some important info for Herald Device chaining setups. While yes, Herald Device indeed cannot be evaded, Armor Explosion can be evaded, which makes having high/100% accuracy to hit targets at 9+ meters extremely important. This is why I recommend dropping Overreach, since it is possible that the 2-meter reduced range is from the source of the hit and not your character, but more testing on this is needed. For Polcirkeln users out there, you still need to make sure that your Armor Explosion specifically can chill. This is due to a bug with Herald Device that was introduced in 0.3. A decent way for you to check this is to equip 2 50% less damage support gems in your primary attack, along with any damage supports you have in your Herald Device, and then go check your estimated chill magnitude. If it is above 30%, you should be good to go. For people who want to use Path of Building instead to check Armor Explosion damage and ailment magnitude, I must warn you, the current Armor Explosion formula inside Path of Building is wrong. What you should do instead is use your primary attack with a custom modifier stating that it will deal 70% less damage. Make sure to socket in all the same supports that are found in your Herald Device, as Armor Explosion does in fact benefit from these support gems. As always, for those of you interested in how this works, I'll now be giving you a full rundown with all my knowledge gained from being the primary theory crafter behind this interaction since even before 0.2. This interaction is incredibly simple and it works as follows. When you trigger Herald Device, it'll explode. This explosion will deal damage and break armor on nearby enemies. When it breaks armor, it'll trigger Armor Explosion, which then will claim credit for killing the enemy it was triggered on. Since it is a non-Herald attack hit, it will then re-trigger Herald Device. Alright, but some of you might be confused. Will this not work if you have too much damage? This is where it is important to have some understanding of both how damage is applied and how kill credit is given. So when Herald Device hits a target, imagine we begin to fill a pool with all the damage our hit will deal. So first we take Herald Device. Herald Device will go through all of its typical damage calculations, at which point it will check for anything our attack would have triggered. In this case, it's Armor Explosion. Now, Armor Explosion will run through its own set of damage calculations. That damage is added to a pool, and then, after checking for any more triggers and seeing that there is none, the game will tally up all of our damage and effectively shift it off to this monster. At this point, the mob looks at the damage it received and checks if this damage would have killed it. It sees, okay, yes, this damage has killed me. Since I am now dead, let me check for on-death effects. Okay, I see that the player has Herald of Ice. Let me check if I've met the criteria to trigger Herald of Ice. Was I shattered? Okay, yeah, I was shattered. Was I killed by a non-herald attack hit? Okay, let me check the damage I just received. Alright, I'm seeing that the last instance of damage was this armor explosion. Okay, and this is a non-herald attack hit. And thus, the monster concludes that this is indeed eligible to re-trigger Herald of Ice and explodes. One last note, if you've seen my explanation and you think maybe you can make Herald of Ice plus Herald of Thunder work with armor explosion inside Herald of Thunder, it is impossible, just trust me. Herald of Thunder is incredibly bugged in 0.3, and it's partly the reason it took me so long to release this video. I'll have a follow-up video recounting all the big bugs and issues with both Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice.